very much in place across parts of northern Scotland, totting up those rainfall totals even further. Another area of low pressure moves in across parts of Tuesday and Wednesday, holding on to the mild theme, but the temperatures will start to drop off quite noticeably from Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
My name is Cliff.
And my name is Julie, and we won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon. It's just there 1 o'clock. Hello. Hello to you. And it's Sunday the 15th of December, and this is the weekend on GB News. Now, Kemi Badenoch has slammed Sir Keir Starmer, saying he thinks he's Mr. Immigration, despite blocking every Tory attempt to stop the boats. It comes as Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says she will not use slogans or put a timeline on bringing the numbers down. And is it a bird? Is it a plane? Is it Chinese espionage? Just what is behind a spate of UFO sightings in the United States? President-elect Donald Trump demands answers as he calls for these mysterious drones to be shot down. And could we really be seeing a three-horse race at the top of British politics? A brand new poll has just put Reform UK 3 points behind the Tories. And I'm asking just how much of a threat Nigel Farage's party will be heading into 2025. I'm Darren Grimes, and the weekend, my friends, starts here. Now, as you know by now, this show is absolutely nothing without you and your views. Let me know your thoughts on all of the stories we'll be discussing today by visiting gbnews.com/your say. Join the conversation there. Now, keeping me company on today's show is the political commentator Matthew Stadlin and the broadcaster Charlie Downs. But before we get stuck into today's stories, here's your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Darren, thank you very much and good afternoon to you. Fast approaching 2 minutes past 1. Well, the top story today, Labour has claimed a record pace for removing migrants from the UK, but channel crossings are still at an all-time high. The Home Office says nearly 13,500 people have been removed since Labour's election win in July. That's the most in any 6-month period since 2019. But the number of channel crossings continues to rise, with now over 21,000 migrants arriving by small boat, including a record 609 on Thursday alone. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says Labour is intensifying border security, and she says cracking down on illegal working. But Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch told us it's Labour who is failing to control our borders.
I'm not going to run away from the subject of immigration. I never have. Labour are pretending that they're tough on immigration when actually they stopped us from doing quite a lot of things. It wasn't just the fact that we had a majority in the Commons. We did not have a majority in the Lords. So a lot of legislation, the Rwanda legislation, even when we were putting it through, it was getting blocked elsewhere. So I'm not going to have Keir Starmer, who wanted foreign criminals to stay in this country, actively stop them from being deported, pretend that he is Mr. Immigration.
Next, the latest developments in Fiji, where at least 7 tourists are now fighting for their life after a suspected mass alcohol poisoning at a luxury resort there. Witnesses have described scenes as terrifying, claiming up to 12 people collapsed. One victim was seen suffering seizures and foaming at the mouth, according to reports, while a young girl believed to be around 8 years old who took a sip from her mother's drink is also reportedly among those fighting for her life. 4 Australians aged 18 to 56 are among those who've been rushed to hospital. The incident comes just weeks after the deaths of 6 other tourists in Laos, also from a suspected alcohol poisoning incident, with British tourist Simone White among those killed. An alleged Chinese spy linked to the Duke of York and 2 former prime ministers posed a national security risk, a tribunal has ruled. The businessman, known only as H6, was barred from the UK last year after reportedly infiltrating high-profile circles, including attending events with David Cameron and Baroness May. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says Britain must maintain economic ties with China, but will act strongly against any security threats. But critics, including Nigel Farage, are calling for the man to be named, while Ian Duncan-Smith is demanding a full investigation into his activities. The Duke of York, though, insists no sensitive matters were ever discussed and says all contact stopped following government advice. An urgent manhunt is underway this afternoon for those responsible for a deadly shooting in northwest London last night. A woman in her 40s was shot and sadly died, while 2 men, both in their 30s, were injured, one of them critically. Residents in Brent say they heard 5 gunshots in quick succession, and police have now cordoned off the area with a number of officers still on the scene. Detectives are now working to track down those behind the attack and are urging anyone with information to come forward. Water bills are set to rise by 20% to fix Britain's broken sewage system, adding around £100 to the average household bill over the next 5 years. Environment Secretary Steve Reed admits the hikes will anger families, but says they're essential to repair years of neglect and to prevent water rationing within 15 years. The regulator Ofwat is expected to approve the increases this week, with some providers pushing for even steeper rises, some of up to 84%. The government, though, says the extra money will be ring-fenced for fixing pipes and building reservoirs, with any unused funds refunded to customers. New laws are also being introduced to force water bosses to report sewage leaks, with tough penalties for non-compliance. And before I hand you back to Darren, news just into us from an area in the Black Sea where 2 Russian tankers have reportedly sunk, spilling a large amount of oil and leaving almost 30 crew members stranded. That incident took place amid a heavy storm in the Kerch Strait, which separates Russia from occupied Crimea. We're hearing at least one crew member is believed to have died so far. Authorities also investigating possible criminal negligence. Some unverified video appears to show one tanker split in half as oil starts to leak into the water. A rescue and clean-up operation is now underway. More than 50 personnel on scene, including a number of tugboats and helicopters. At this stage, though, the full extent of that oil spill is still unknown. Those are the latest headlines for now. More in half an hour. Now, though, it's back to Darren.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers very much, Sam. Let's get stuck into today's topics. The Home Secretary has refused to set herself a deadline to bring illegal migration to heel, despite admitting that the rate of illegal channel crossings is far too high. Yvette Cooper criticised the Tory government, saying slogans will simply not solve the small boats crisis. Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch spoke to Camilla Tominey on GB News this morning. Let's have a little listen to what she had to say.
I'm not going to run away from the subject of immigration. I never have. Labour are pretending that they're tough on immigration when actually they stopped us from doing quite a lot of things. It wasn't just the fact that we had a majority in the Commons. We did not have a majority in the Lords. So a lot of legislation, the Rwanda legislation, even when we were putting it through, it was getting blocked elsewhere. So I'm not going to have Keir Starmer, who wanted foreign criminals to stay in this country, actively stop them from being deported, pretend that he is Mr. Immigration.
I know a lot of you at home aren't buying that. Well, let's speak to one man who may not be buying it either. Joining me now is the chairman of Migration Watch, Alp Mehmet. Alp, thank you very much for your company as ever. Where do you draw the line here? Because on both sides of the political fence, you can say a plague on both their houses in this regard, can you not?
You can. The fact is that the Tories are history. They're not there any longer. It's now very much up to the Labour government, to Yvette Cooper, to do something about it. I was amused to say that she's not going to come up with slogans. What is "we're going to smash the gangs" all about then? If that isn't a slogan, I don't know what is. But look, what we've heard today is very much of an expensive sham, in my view. When there was an announcement last month of around 10,000 being removed, we learned that only 2,500 were in fact forced removals, which would have included former national offenders, prisoners. And the rest included 609 Brazilians, all of whom, and 109 children, I think, if I remember rightly, all of them, including children, received £3,000 to go back to Brazil. They were voluntary returns. The vast majority of these that we've heard about are voluntary returns. They're not forced returns. They're doing nothing to dissuade or deter those who are coming across the channel in boats. So frankly, I take all of what's been said today as with a pinch of salt. At the moment, people are not discouraged, and they will continue to come in very high numbers, 35 to 40,000 coming next year, I'm sure. Yeah. That's appalling.
Alp, what would you do then if it were in my gift to actually make you Home Secretary? I mean, I think Labour would sooner see hell freeze over, but you get my drift. And if it happened, Alp, would you be stopping the incentives? Is it the pull incentives, you know, the bed, board and benefits? Is that what brings people to Britain? What is it that's doing this?
But primarily, what's doing it is that people are coming from countries where they haven't got a job, they haven't got the prospects of education. They really are desperate to get out. They're not asylum seekers in the strict sense of the word. They are economic migrants. Anyone arriving illegally, I would detain and I would remove. And many of those who come from safe countries, as we've seen with the numbers that have been removed, going back to Romania, to Brazil, to Vietnam. These are the easy countries. But what about the others? Those who are coming from countries where we can't send them back? What would I do with them? I would detain them, hold on to them, and get them back to a country that's willing to accept them, like Rwanda. Getting rid of the Rwanda scheme was a bad idea. It was a shocking idea, really. And doing it before giving it a chance to actually work. It was all set and ready to go, and they ditched it. So that was foolish.
700 million quid. 700 million quid down the drain, Alp. I mean, it beggars belief.
Well, it does. But if you look at those who have been removed now, if you take account of the charter flights, 30 charter flights, around £12 million. If you take into account those who are being induced to go back with £3,000 in their pocket, what is happening now is very costly. And at the same time, we've still got everyone coming in, being put up in hotels, very comfortable, being given pocket money, being given free medical treatment.
Yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't they come?
Well, indeed, it's not border force. I think it's border farce at this point. But Alp, thank you very much for that insight, as ever. That's the chairman of Migration Watch there, Alp Mehmet. Let's see what my panel make of this. The political commentator Matthew Stadlin and the broadcaster Charlie Downs join me now. Hello to both of you. Matthew, I'll start with you. The charge there by Kemi Badenoch says that actually this was down to the House of Lords, that they couldn't get anything done as far as migration is concerned. Do you buy that? Labour Lords actually blocking immigration policies?
Well, I think it's a bit rich of a government that was in power for 14 years to blame Labour Lords. Let's focus on the government that we've got today, which is a Labour government. And I think the key thing here is that they want to stop these boats as much as Nigel Farage wants to stop these boats. And I think that's for two reasons. One, because, like me, and I think like most people watching, they don't think that people should come here illegally. And two is because they realise that it could be a political headache for them at the next election if they don't get a grip on it. The tricky thing is, it's very difficult to get a grip on it, and there will be some succor from these numbers, even if many of them or some of them have been voluntary returns, but that's still 13,500 people since Labour came to power, and they are on track, according to the government, to send people back to their home countries in greater numbers now than for the last 5 years.
Right. I mean, Charlie, are you buying that? The argument Christopher has written in, and Christopher says you don't need the Lords and you've got an 80-seat majority, right? This is just a pathetic excuse. Where are you at on that argument?
Yeah, I think that a lot of these issues, especially the issue of migration, both legal and illegal, comes down to the question of political will. The Tory party didn't have the political will to solve this problem.
Does Labour?
I think in a weird sort of a way they have more of a will, because we saw today that Labour are bragging about having deported over 13,000 illegal migrants.
Was saying there that these are all voluntary.
Not all.
They're not dealing with most of them, and actually dealing with the issue of those who are here illegally, for example, it's going to be much more difficult.
Well, this is the point, is we've had in that same time over 20,000 legal migrants come, so we're still in the net positive for illegal migration this year. And I think that part of this issue that actually I don't see a lot of people talking about is the fact that, sure, there is a large amount of incompetence when it comes to solving this issue. There are people who don't know how to do their jobs because we have this hugely bloated civil service where nothing ever seems to get done. There is a degree, I think, of intent, as in there are ideologically possessed elements of the system that want this kind of thing to happen. But I also think that even if the political will did exist, even if we had a governing class that was absolutely uncompromisingly set on solving this problem, the modern managerial state is so inefficient, so hulking, so poorly equipped to deal with a problem that requires such a quick turnaround, that I think we have to have a conversation about a more kind of fundamental element.
This plays out very well for reform, though, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. There's no doubt about it, because it's much easier to shout from the sidelines, as I was doing during the Tory years. Just to pick you up on one or two of those points. First of all, I suspect that net illegal migration to this country is far higher than you've suggested.
Yeah,
because
it's
not just people coming over on boats. People find all sorts of ways to come here. It's just that the boats are the most visible, and I think the reason partly why we've been talking about it as much as we have in recent years. This idea that there's a sort of bloated civil service is easy talk. I don't know what your experience of the civil service is, but also the idea that there are sort of people ingrained in the system, or an idea ingrained in the system that somehow wants to welcome illegal migrants, I think is just simply not true. Yeah, you'll find people in our country who believe in open borders. That's their ideology. They're welcome to that view if they want. It's not a view that I hold. It's certainly not a view that the Labour government holds or Keir Starmer holds. The problem is it is immensely difficult, if you believe and subscribe to a rules-based system and to international law, to remove people who are coming from countries where there is a risk to their life or to their limbs. And in the case of France, just to make this point, because I've had to make it so many times, you cannot simply pick up people in the Channel, take them back to French waters and dump them there without the permission of the French.
I mean, a lot of viewers will be screaming at their television set saying, well, you know, I don't give a flying flamingo about the French position on that.
Well,
we should just be turning them back and putting them back on French territory.
That's what I'm talking about when I say political will. I think if we had a governing class that really had the best interests of Britain at heart, they wouldn't allow any kind of, nominal international treaty or anything like that to get in the way of solving this problem, because there's nothing more important right now than solving the dual problems of legal and illegal migration. But two quick points, Matthew, on what you were saying. The first, I agree that these numbers are probably underreported just by the nature of illegal migration. You know, it is something that's quite difficult to keep track of. But more to the point, in 2017, Pew published a research paper that said that there could be as many, in 2017, by the way, as many as 1.2 million illegal migrants residing in Britain. So when I say that we need to have a system that is more well-equipped to deal with this problem, I'm not just talking about the people who have come since Labour got into power. I'm talking about the totality of those over 1.2 million people who are currently residing here illegally. The second thing I wanted to ask you is, do you think that we have a politically neutral civil service?
That's a really difficult question for me to answer, because I haven't spent any time within the civil service. Well, you can read Daily Mail headlines if you like. I have no idea what the politics are of people who reside in the civil service. What I did spend time doing was working for the BBC for 8.5 to 9 years, and I worked right in the heart of BBC politics and BBC News, and it was very, very difficult, perhaps with the exception of one or two people, to know what their politics were, because people rightly did not reveal their politics. I was a left-leaning person within the BBC, and I can tell you that I strained every sinew for every debate that I produced and organised, for every interview I did, to be politically neutral. So it's easy to make these sweeping accusations, but unless you've got personal experience of it, I'm not sure it's very helpful.
A brief reply, Charlie?
Well, our job as broadcasters and commentators is to look at the system that we live under and to draw conclusions, to make observations. And the revealed preference of the civil service and the various organs of the managerial state that governs Britain appears to be an ever leftward shift, politically speaking, and it's presented as neutral because that's politically wise to do that. It's wise to say, well, open borders is just... It was like what Blair used to say. It's inevitable. It's the future.
But that's got nothing to do with why we're not sending people back to France. The reason we're not...
It's ideological possession.
The reason we're not sending people back... The reason we're not sending people back to France isn't, as you say, because of some sort of nominal international treaty. And treaties, by the way, are not nominal. They're either treaties or they're not. The reason we're not sending people back to France is because the French won't let us.
All right, Benny's written in, and Benny says the civil service is not politically neutral. It's infested with woke lefties. So that's one view. And Anne says, let's all stop paying our taxes and we'll see how quickly the government stops the illegals coming in. Well, that's one way to put it. Right, Matthew Stadlin there and Charlie Downs, thank you very much to them. Now, for all the best analysis and opinion on that story and more, you can go to our website. We're at gbnews.com. You're with me, Darren Grimes, on GB News. Lots more coming up on the show. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Is it Chinese espionage? Just what is behind a spate of UFO sightings in the United States? Well, President-elect has demanded answers from the government. All of that and more to come. You're with GB News, we're Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
What it's so funny the Times did this story, because I was on the train yesterday trying to do some work and connecting to the Wi-Fi, and it happens all the time. It just doesn't work. It's pathetic. And then I opened the Times and they've done a massive investigation. Loads of different rail routes from north to south.
Was that the James Bond thing, right?
Yes. Yeah. What's
that passenger got through, or almost got through, one episode of one James Bond movie in 8 hours.
But you know, it's interesting. We call it train Wi-Fi, but it isn't. It's just really a SIM card on a train, really. So if your own phone's not going to get signal, why would we assume that the train's going to have signal? It just doesn't work like that. Unless you're in Japan or South Korea, whose infrastructure is infinitely better than ours, you're just not going to get signal. You have to download those films way before you get on
There is technology that can help with that. You know, there really is. If they found ways to put it underground, they can get it on ground and get you going. I definitely think, you know, with the price that we're paying for these tickets, they can get the Wi-Fi going. There is technology.
That's why it's so frustrating, isn't
Call
it?
Elon, get a Starlink. Let's go.
If you're a passenger paying hundreds of pounds for a season ticket or whatever you call it, and you commute to work every single day, and you're paying all this money, and you can't.
It's so expensive. You'd expect Wi-Fi at the basic. Yeah, exactly.
But it happens with phone signal as well. I'll be walking down London in Park Lane or somewhere else, or down on the south coast. I just don't have phone signal, and I think to myself, what on earth is going on?
Doesn't it feel like 5G's made it worse, though?
Yeah.
Because I feel like 4G, that didn't happen so much, but 5G just feels like...
Yeah, and then I always get this little E in the top corner of my phone, and I don't get any signal. I think it's got worse over the past couple of years. Yeah, especially with 5G. I agree with that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Darren Grimes. Nationwide drone sightings. They continue to send the United States into a frenzy, with the public demanding answers to this question. What on earth are these mysterious objects in the sky? The drones first appeared last month, and some lawmakers have suggested that they could be part of an Iranian or Chinese spy program. Others have gone further, linking them to a sinister government plot. President-elect Donald Trump has demanded answers, ordering the government to let the public know what's going on. If not, he suggested shooting the drones down. Well, joining me now is the security expert at the University of Buckingham, Professor Anthony Glees. Anthony, thank you very much for your company. Just how much of a threat do you think these drones pose to the United States? I wouldn't be all too confident if I saw these things flying above my house either, mind.
Well, Darren, I think they pose a psychological threat
to
the United States, because it's clear that a lot of people are extremely upset about these drones. Whether they pose a, tactical, strategic, military threat of some kind, that's doubtful. It's important to unpick these things because you always get conspiracy theories when people speak in a general way about things. And your viewers may remember last February 2023, there were sightings of drones over North America, and indeed a huge Chinese balloon was ultimately in February 23 shot down by the United States Air Force at the command of President Biden. So there have been odd things in American skies, and some of those odd things have been Chinese. Balloons aren't the same as drones, and drones aren't, strictly speaking, manned aircraft. And here in the UK, we've also had 4 really important United States Air Force bases in the east of England are plagued by drones. So, this is a real thing, but what does it mean? And as far as we can tell, the Biden government is just obfuscating, is not coming out with a theory. They're telling us what they're not. So they're saying they're nothing for which the US Secret Service is responsible. They're saying they don't come from an Iranian ship in North America. And they're also pointing out that there was a law passed in September 23 to ensure that anybody flying a drone has got to be a registered pilot.
Yes.
But apart from that, they're not saying anything. Could it be sinister? Yes, it could. That's why we need to be told exactly what's going on. Also in the UK, I have to say, this isn't just about American drones. It's about us too over here.
How much of a threat are drones in particular? I mean, the fear, there was some American fella was arrested the other week because he shot one of them down over his house. I mean, are we going to see people taking sort of civilian action against these flying objects in the sky that terrify people?
Absolutely. I mean, you don't want to shoot things down, particularly if there's nothing wrong with them, because you'll cause a mayhem. You don't want to fire bullets up in the air because you don't know where they land. This is a national security issue, but it's worthwhile recalling that I just checked before speaking to you. There are 1.8 million registered drone pilots in the United States of America. So people flying these things. However, just a few weeks ago, a Chinese citizen was arrested having flown a drone in the south of the USA over an important Air Force base. In other words, we need to be alert. As I say, we've got these 4 USA Air Force airfields in the UK, absolutely critical for the defence of Europe. And drones have flown over them. Who's responsible? We haven't been told. They haven't been shot down, anything. As we get into an increasingly dangerous or potentially dangerous situation in Europe in 2025, somebody who's got precise knowledge of what is in a particular airfield, well, they're in quite a strong position. So I don't think we should shrug. I don't think these conspiracy theories, not little green men from Mars, but they might be controlled by, little people from China. I wouldn't be surprised, some of them.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Anthony, thank you very much for that insight there. That is the security expert at the University of Buckingham, Anthony Glees, professor there. Let's see what my panel make of this. Political commentator Matthew Stadlin and the broadcaster Charlie Downs. Charlie, how worried ought we be about the threat that these drones pose? Because I don't know about you, but every article I read now is about how drones will be a major part of warfare in the modern era.
Yeah, I think that's demonstrably true. And my first thought when I saw this story today was it's probably the American government doing these things, because the American government doesn't exactly have a great track record when it comes to doing things to the population that make them kind of go a little bit wild, whether it was MKUltra in the 80s or Operation Northwoods or the, mass surveillance by the NSA. The US government isn't exactly clean when it comes to just doing stuff that they refuse to explain.
In Britain as well, though, you mean they're operating the drones?
Look, I mean, the US state, we've been talking about the British state today and how bloated and enormous and unaccountable in many cases it is. The US state is is like the model for that, right? So do I think the American government and, you know, the various organs of the intelligence agencies in that country, would they be prepared to just test military hardware, which is what this looks like, without telling the public, without explaining it, refusing really even to address it? Yeah, I think they would.
Matthew, I mean, where are you at on this? Because it does terrify a lot of people seeing these scenes of little flying things in the sky that no one knows what the hell they are.
Well, firstly, the British state is not unaccountable. We live in a very strong and robust democracy. On the issue of the drones...
Well, they're not telling us what they are, though, are they?
Well, no, let's move across to America now. On the issue of the drones, I find it a little bit peculiar that the American government hasn't worked out, if they haven't worked out, and I suspect if they had worked out what these drones are, they would have let the American population know. I'm surprised they haven't managed to work it out yet.
Maybe, as Charlie says, it is the American government.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, so that's not what I would jump to. But on the issue of warfare, which is how you introduce this, I mean, you only have to look at the threat to Israel in those recent exchanges with Iran. And Israel, of course, has the Iron Dome, and not just the Iron Dome, other forms of defending itself as well, to realise that these are very serious threats moving forward. And I'm one of those people who happens to think that we should have a robust defence in this country, and clearly it's not at the moment robust enough.
No, indeed. I mean, Charlie, the point here about British investment in defence in particular has been pretty low for a long time, cuts across the piece. The Labour Party are saying they're going to reverse that trend. They're not saying by when. The question is one of priorities. Do you think it ought to be a priority?
If you look at the extent to which adversary states like China are gearing up, I think it's self-evident that Britain is woefully under-equipped if a war were to break out tomorrow. And that's very concerning, because we routinely antagonise geopolitical enemies like China, and we seem to be all bark and no bite. We seem not to have the actual, the equipment to actually follow those kind of attacks and smears up. But I've got to say, I mean, you know, drone warfare it's a really interesting thing. I mean, it's one or 2 degrees away from Terminator, isn't it? We've just got robots fighting each other.
Well, he's coming as well.
Yeah, well, I think that's very, very dark. But Matthew, I wanted to pick you up on something there very quickly.
We've got to go to a break now, but we'll come back. We'll come back. Okay. We'll come back after the break, and you can ask that question. That was Matthew Stadlin there on my left, and the broadcaster Charlie Downs on my right. Right, you're with me, Darren Grimes, on GB News. We've got plenty more to come on today's show, including Charlie's question. We're heading up to a farming fair in Northern Ireland to discuss the ongoing anxiety in the industry following Labour's tax raid. Before that, though, here's your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 1:30. The top story this hour. Nearly 13,500 people have been removed from the UK since Labour's election win in July. That is the most in any 6-month period for the last 5 years. But the number of channel crossings is still at an all-time high, with over 21,000 people arriving by small boat, including a record of 609 on Thursday. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says Labour is intensifying border security and cracking down on illegal working. But the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, says it's Labour who are failing to control the borders.
I'm not going to run away from the subject of immigration. I never have. Labour are pretending that they're tough on immigration when actually they stopped us from doing quite a lot of things. It wasn't just the fact that we had a majority in the Commons. We did not have a majority in the Lords. So a lot of legislation, the Rwanda legislation, even when we were putting it through, it was getting blocked elsewhere. So I'm not going to have Keir Starmer, who wanted foreign criminals to stay in this country, actively stop them from being deported, pretend that he is Mr. Immigration.
Well, some breaking news to bring you from the West Midlands. We're just hearing that a 2-year-old boy has died. 4 adults also seriously injured after a hit and run, reportedly involving a stolen Porsche. The toddler was rushed to hospital following that crash in Smethwick just before 11 o'clock last night. But despite the efforts of medical teams there, the child sadly died. A 29-year-old woman, 30-year-old man, both remain in a serious condition. We're also hearing that another man and a woman, both aged 30, are stable. Well, police say an urgent hunt is now underway for the driver after the vehicle smashed into another car. Police are also calling on the driver to make the right decision and hand themselves in. An urgent manhunt is also underway for those responsible for a deadly shooting in northwest London on Saturday night. A woman in her 40s was shot and killed, while two men, both in their 30s, were injured, one of them critically. Residents in Brent say they heard 5 gunshots in quick succession, and police have now cordoned off the area with a number of officers still at the scene. Detectives are working to track down those behind the attack and are urging anyone with any information to come forward. In Fiji, at least 7 tourists are fighting for their lives after a mass suspected alcohol poisoning at a luxury resort there. Witnesses have described the scenes as terrifying, claiming up to 12 people collapsed. One victim was seen suffering seizures and foaming at the mouth, while a young girl who took a sip of her mother's drink is also reportedly fighting for her life. 4 Australians are among those being rushed to hospital, and the incident comes just weeks after the deaths of 6 tourists in Laos also suffered from suspected methanol poisoning, with a British tourist, Simone White, 28 years old, among those killed in that incident. And 2 Russian oil tankers have sunk in the Black Sea, spilling oil and leaving up to 30 crew members stranded. The incident took place amid a heavy storm. At least 1 crew member is believed to have died. Authorities are also investigating possible criminal negligence. Some unverified video appears to show one tanker split in half as oil leaks into the water. A rescue and clean-up operation is now underway with more than 50 personnel, tugboats and helicopters on scene. The full extent of the oil spill, though, is still unknown. Those are the latest headlines for now. A full roundup at 2 o'clock, and Darren will be back with you after this break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. Quite a mild theme to our weather over the coming few days, but also a windy one as well. You'll see on the pressure chart there is a lot of isobars here, meaning some very strong winds around, particularly around parts of the North Yorkshire area. The A1M could provide some quite tricky travelling conditions with gusts of up to 65 miles an hour here, and there's a wind warning in force. Also some gales around coastal areas of Scotland also. Quite cloudy for most of us this afternoon with spots of drizzle in the west, the most persistent rain across areas of western Scotland. But you'll see there that mild theme in place for all of us everywhere in double-digit figures, well above where we'd normally expect to be for this time in December. That theme will generally continue as we head into this evening as well. The cloud really remaining intact for the vast majority of us, quite grey skies into the evening period. Again, those odd spots of drizzle out towards the west just to contend with, but the rain really will be very persistent across parts of western Scotland. Over the next 24, 48 hours, we could see widely half a month's worth of rain falling across parts of the Scottish Highlands, perhaps locally up to 150 millimetres of rain. So some travel disruption is certainly possible, and a rain warning comes into force from this evening, running all the way through until midday on Tuesday, with that rain really very persistent and heavy at times. Further strong gusts of winds throughout tonight, with a very squally band that moves its way into parts of Caithness and Sutherland as well. Temperatures, though, again, are going to be on the mild side for many of us, holding up around 9 to 11 degrees Celsius. As we head throughout the rest of Monday, that rain band is still very much in play across areas of Scotland. But elsewhere for Northern Ireland, England and Wales will hopefully start to see the cloud breaking up a bit more and a few more sunny spells developing during that afternoon period to provide a bit of a brighter day overall. Still, though, the odd shower around to contend with. Temperatures reasonably similar to today as well, generally 11 to 12 degrees Celsius. That mild, slightly unsettled theme does continue throughout Tuesday and Wednesday, but a few sunnier spells again emerging into Thursday, our temperatures also dipping. Bye-bye.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here We do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very warm welcome back to The Weekend with me, Darren Grimes. Now, one of the highlights of Northern Ireland's farming industry is the annual Royal Ulster Winter Fair. This year, there was only one topic in town. Can you guess what it is? Labour's inheritance tax levy on family farms. GB News Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie was there to find out more.
The agri-food sector is one of Northern Ireland's top industries. Throughout the year, it feeds over 6 million mouths across the UK. The Winter Fair is mainly aimed at the dairy sector, and the judging of cattle is a chance to look at the quality of the Irish herd. Even royalty gets involved. The Duke of Edinburgh was keen to talk to those from right across the sector. 15 years ago, there was almost 30,000 UK dairy farms. Now businesses that supply the sector are alarmed at the current number.
In the last 6 years, I would say there was about 13,000, and I know now, more recently, in the last 12 months, that's gone down to about 8,000 dairy farms in the UK.
The Winter Fair is so much more than another social gathering. It's a real chance for the industry to have a look at what's on offer, what they may invest in as they come towards the end of the financial year. And of course, that will have to be spread over 5 to 10 years. And with the inheritance tax looming over them, how much confidence is there in the sector?
The one thing which is really troubling farmers more than anything else is, of course, this inheritance tax, which is hanging like an axe over many of their businesses. And that's the one thing. I mean, farmers are traditionally optimistic individuals. They want to farm, they want to produce food. But whenever they have this hanging over them and this lack of engagement that we're seeing from this Labour government in terms of getting involved with ourselves to discuss the issue, that's what's worrying them.
My father, my grandfather, myself, my uncles all worked for our boys to have a farm. If I die and they have to pay the inheritance tax, it'll take them 20 years to pay it. They'll then be old men, then maybe they'll die, and then their kids will have to pay it again, by which stage land prices will have gone up, so the bill will be higher. So it's a death tax that never ends.
Ulster Farmers Union Vice President John McClelland says the stand against the inheritance tax will come from both rural and business communities.
I mean, farmers are angry. There's no doubt about that. Farmers also recognise that this is a process and it is a battle. What I will say to you is we are not ruling anything out. This will take everybody. This will take everybody within the farming community, within the rural community, within the business community, because this is not just farmers who are going to be affected by this. This is all business coming together to send a very clear message that this just cannot stand.
Doogie Beattie, GB News at the Winter Fair.
Brilliant as ever from Doogie there. Let's see what my panel make of this. The political commentator Matthew Stadlin and the broadcaster Charlie Downs. Matthew, I'll start with you. The couple of things to add on to that. This week, the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee met with the chair of the NFU, a chief of the NFU, I should say, and that's the National Farmers Union. And he broke down in tears, saying that actually he's worried about what he's heard anecdotally about people saying that they will find ways to circumvent the 7-year rule on inheritance by ensuring they die early. And that kind of thing is alarming and really quite troubling to hear. And especially his emotions just getting the better of him, and he just broke down in front of this committee. How alarmed are you by that, and how alarmed are you by Labour advisers in the press today saying that actually they think the rate of inheritance tax should be raised to 20 million for farms from the proposed 1 million?
So when you see anyone or hear of anyone in distress, then of course you feel for them. And I, right from the beginning, I've seen the issues with the politics of this. It came out of the blue, and farmers, I think, were given reassurance by a shadow Labour minister before they became into power that there wouldn't be any change to agricultural property relief. And on an individual basis, of course, I have sympathy for people who are planning for one thing and now might have to plan for another. But if you look at the policy itself, it was clearly designed to stop this tax loophole where people could invest very heavily in farms, people of enormous wealth, and avoid inheritance tax that way. Of course, with all these things, there's a question, a debate to be had, and admittedly, we didn't have that debate because this was imposed by the government without a public debate, and it wasn't in the manifesto. But of course, there is always a question mark as to where you put the level. Okay. And personally, I would have probably put it a bit higher, but if you go back to first principles, there is this very important question: why do farmers have a right that the rest of us don't have, which is to pass on enormous amounts of wealth without inheritance tax?
I mean, answer that question, Charlie. The fairness issue, which is one you would hear from the government very often, but also the issue around advisors to the government, or advisors who have been supportive generally on tax policy from this government, saying that actually it's too low at 1 million, that you will break up family farms. And I think actually the hearts of the British public are very much with the farmers because they actually romanticise, I guess, the agricultural sector in this country.
Well, to bring it back to something that we've spoken about a few times today, which is the British state, I think it's crucial to understand the way that the managerial state that governs us views our country. They view it as an economic zone. They view it as a balance sheet. They view it as something to be understood in quantitative terms, in terms of profit and loss. And so they can't wrap their heads, and this is the view that's just been expressed by Matthew, they can't wrap their heads around, you know, basically treating different groups, different areas of the economy differently.
So it's like pound and pence over
but there are things that can't be expressed in the quantitative language of science which are important, like the continuity of a family farm. That's very important to the country.
Thank you, Charlie. We're run out of time there, but we'll be back with Charlie in a second. You're with me, Darren Grimes at GB News. We've got lots more coming up. Chris McCausland and Diana Buswell win Strictly Come Dancing in a tear-jerking finale. We'll be getting the lowdown on their celebrations after this. All of that and more to come. You're with GB News, we're Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
It seems that the younger generation's interest in literature is waning. Academics argue that educational policies have failed to encourage reading for pleasure, contributing to declining numbers of English literature students and a shift towards young adult books rather than classic novels. According to 2023 figures from the National Literacy Trust, the number of 8 to 18-year-olds who say they enjoy reading has sunk to its lowest level for almost 20 years, with a quarter fewer reading each day over that same time period. To share more with us about this topic, I'm joined now by the journalist Charlotte Lytton. Charlotte, welcome back. Lovely to talk to you again. Tell us your perspective on this issue. What is happening?
Well, speaking to academics, we can't deny, it seems, that there is a big problem here, and it starts right at school. As you read there, young children simply don't enjoy reading for pleasure as they did before. We can't deny that is also a massive part because of smartphones, because kids now are faced with all of these things vying for their attention. They just don't have to sit down and entertain themselves with a long book and nothing else as they did before. As we see from those figures with people going to study humanities at university, the decline is just going all the way because people simply are not interested in reading for pleasure as they were.
Do you get any feeling that education policy or that teachers are taking steps to counter this?
Well, there is a review of the curriculum going ahead right now, but school is a huge part of it. One of the things that has come up in this conversation is whether teachers now are dealing with crowd control, which means they can't simply encourage reading for pleasure because they're simply trying to get a hold of the students they have.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Darren Grimes. Strictly Come Dancing. Well, Chris McCausland and his pro partner, Diane Buswell, have been crowned 2024's champions after the comedian made history as the show's first ever blind contestant. When he was announced as the winner, Chris broke down in tears as he was embraced by fellow celebs before throwing Diane triumphantly over his shoulder as the audience, well, they lost it a little bit and went a bit wild, all in good fun. Joining me now is the former editor-in-chief of New and Star magazines, Lebby Ayres. Lebby, thank you very much for your company. This is the first time, actually, that Diane has won as a professional dancer as well. Just how groundbreaking is this win in the history of the show?
Yeah, I thought it was an amazing, absolutely amazing show. Sat down, watched the whole thing last night. I think Anton it was that summed it up, and he said Chris may not have been the best dancer, but he's an extraordinary person. And I think I'd probably sort of add to that, it was an extraordinary partnership. And, you know, Diane is just, you know, she's a fantastic partner to her dancers. She's bubbly, she's supportive. You could see from the way that they were interacting last night how much it meant to both of them. And also, I think you could see how much it meant to the rest of the dancers and the rest of the competitors on Strictly. You know, everyone was overjoyed for them. You know, it was probably a little bit hard on Tasha, who maybe in any other year might have won. But, you know, I think I went on X, you know, about sort of 10 minutes before the final result was announced, and it was literally 100% Chris and Diane, Chris and Diane, Chris and Diane. I mean, the whole nation got behind them and the whole nation wanted them to win. And, you know, I shed a tear. I'm sure that I wasn't alone in that. I think, you know, the bit that I almost loved the best was when Claudia said to him that he'd broken Craig. You know, we finally saw kind of that Craig show his soft side, and that was amazing too.
Let me ask you this just briefly, if you would. Has this saved the show? Because the show obviously has been mired in scandal and controversy. Has it saved it for the BBC?
Absolutely. I think without a doubt. I think, you know, it has been a really difficult year. Even the beginning of this series was a little bit difficult for them. But now this is a moment that no one will ever forget. Everyone that was involved said it was the best final ever, and I agree. It was truly emotional and really a deserving winner.
All right, Lebby, thank you very much for that update there on Strictly Come Dancing and that landmark victory. You're with me, Darren Grimes, on GB News. Lots more coming up on the show. First of all, though, we're going to get a look at your weather with Jonathan Vautry.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, very good afternoon to you. This is your latest GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. Rain and wind in the story for some of us over the next few days. Quite blustery for many of us. On the pressure chart, you can see quite a lot of isobars on there, really packing together to produce some strong gusts around at times. The rain, though, really courtesy of this cold front that's slipping into northern areas of Scotland. It will turn quite persistent and heavy at times over western areas, particularly the Highlands, over the next 24-48 hours. A bit drier further towards the south, but still quite cloudy throughout this evening, and overnight the odd spot of drizzle still to contend with around some hillier sites. Underneath that cloud, though, it is going to be a mild night for most of us. Temperatures holding up around 9 to 11 degrees Celsius as we start off Monday morning. In that rain band in the north, though, really is going to be very persistent. Locally, we could see up to 150 millimetres of rain across parts of western Scotland. That certainly is possible to provide some disruption in places, and a rain warning is enforced, so do take care here over the next couple of days or so. Hopefully though, for parts of Northern Ireland and then eventually into England and Wales as well, we'll start to see the cloud breaking up a touch more throughout the rest of Monday, and that will provide more in the way of those brighter, sunnier spells to develop compared to what we are seeing over the course of Sunday, which is quite cloudy conditions. Still locally gusty in places, particularly around some coastal districts. Temperatures though, with those winds coming in from a southwesterly direction, they are still going to be on the mild side, so temperatures for many are still in double-digit figures, topping up at around 12 or 11 degrees Celsius, notably above where we'd normally expect to be for this time of year in December. And to Monday evening will feature a very similar picture. Again, a few clear spells across more southern districts, but that rain will still remain very much in place across parts of northern Scotland, totting up those rainfall totals even further. Another area of low pressure moves in across parts of Tuesday and Wednesday, holding on to the mild theme, but the temperatures will start to drop off quite noticeably from Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the biggest, greatest Great British giveaway so far, with your chance to win a spectacular £50,000 in tax-free cash. 2025 could be amazing, with plenty of treats, holidays and fun on the horizon. How would you enjoy that cash? £50,000 will make someone our biggest ever winner. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Good Afternoon Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock on Sunday, the 15th of December. This is The Weekend on GB News. Kemi Badenoch has slammed Keir Starmer, saying he thinks he's Mr. Immigration, despite blocking every Tory attempt to stop the boats. It comes as Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says she will not use slogans or put a timeline on bringing the numbers down. And is it a bird? Is it a plane? Is it Chinese espionage? Just what on earth is going on with these spate of UFO sightings in the United States and in the United Kingdom, it has to be said? President-elect Donald Trump has demanded answers as he calls for these mysterious drones to be shot down. And could we really be seeing a three-horse race at the top of British politics? A brand new poll has put Reform UK just 3 points behind the Conservatives. I'm asking, how much of a threat does Nigel Farage's party pose to the duopoly in 2025? I'm Darren Grimes, and this is The Weekend. Now, this show is absolutely nothing without you and your views. Let me know your thoughts on all of the stories we'll be discussing today by visiting gbnews.com/yoursay. Join that conversation. Now, keeping me company on today's show is the political commentator Matthew Stadlin and the broadcaster Charlie Downs. But before we get stuck into today's stories, here's the news with Sam Francis.
Darren, thank you very much and good afternoon to you. It's just after 2 o'clock. The top story today, well, Labour has claimed a record pace for removing migrants from the UK, but channel crossings are still at an all-time high. The Home Office says nearly 13,500 people have been removed since Labour's election win in July. That is the most in any six-month period since 2019. But the number of channel crossings continues to rise, with now over 21,000 migrants arriving by small boat, including a record 609 on Thursday alone. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says that Labour is intensifying border security and cracking down on illegal working. But the leader of the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch, told us here on GB News it's Labour, she says, who are failing to control the borders.
I'm not going to run away from the subject of immigration. I never have. Labour are pretending that they're tough on immigration when actually they stopped us from doing quite a lot of things. It wasn't just the fact that we had a majority in the Commons. We did not have a majority in the Lords. So a lot of legislation, the Rwanda legislation, even when we were putting it through, it was getting blocked elsewhere. So I'm not going to have Keir Starmer, who wanted foreign criminals to stay in this country, actively stop them from being deported, pretend that he is Mr. Immigration.
Let's bring you an update now on that breaking news we brought you in the last half hour or so, that a 2-year-old boy has sadly died. 4 adults also seriously injured. That's after a hit and run involving a stolen Porsche in the West Midlands. The toddler was rushed to hospital following the crash in Smethwick just before 11 o'clock last night. But despite the efforts of medical teams, the child died. A 29-year-old woman and a 30-year-old man also remain in a serious condition. Well, an urgent hunt is now underway for the driver of that Porsche after it smashed into another car. Police are calling on the driver to make the right decision, they say, and hand themselves in. In London, meanwhile, an urgent manhunt is underway for those responsible for a deadly shooting in the northwest of the capital last night. A woman in her 40s was shot and killed, while 2 men, both in their 30s, were injured, one of them critically. Residents in Brent say they heard 5 gunshots in quick succession, and police have now cordoned off the area with a number of officers still on scene. Detectives are now working to track down those who may have been behind the attack, and they're urging anyone with information to come forward. An alleged Chinese spy linked to the Duke of York and 2 former Prime Ministers posed a national security risk, a tribunal has ruled today. The businessman, known only as H6, was barred from the UK last year after reportedly infiltrating high-profile circles, including attending events with David Cameron and Theresa May. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says Britain must maintain economic ties with China, but will act strongly against any security threats. But critics, including Nigel Farage from the Reform Party, are calling for the man to be named, while Sir Ian Duncan-Smith is demanding a full investigation into activities. The Duke of York, though, insists no sensitive matters were ever discussed and says all contact stopped following government advice. And just another breaking line to bring you, we're hearing from Dublin that Israel has just announced it will be closing its embassy there in the Irish capital, citing what it describes as Ireland's extreme anti-Israel policy and stance. Israel's foreign minister saying that Ireland have crossed every red line, particularly after supporting South Africa's legal action against Israel at the International Court of Justice. The Irish PM has just said that it is very sad news to hear that, and it was regrettable, adding that the news that the embassy in Dublin will be closed. They are just announcing that in response, Israel will be focusing on strengthening ties with other countries in the region based on their more positive, they say, attitude towards the Jewish state. So that news just into us from Dublin in the last few minutes. Turning to Fiji now, though, and at least 7 tourists are fighting for their lives after a suspected mass alcohol poisoning at a luxury resort there. Witnesses have described the scenes as terrifying, claiming up to 12 people collapsed. One victim was seen suffering seizures and foaming at the mouth, while a young girl took a sip of her mother's drink and is reportedly now also fighting for her life. 4 Australians are among those who have been rushed to hospital. That incident comes just weeks after the deaths of 6 other tourists in Laos, also from suspected alcohol poisoning, with one British tourist, Simone White, who was 28 at the time, among those killed. And 2 Russian oil tankers have sunk in the Black Sea this afternoon, spilling oil and leaving 29 crew members stranded. The incident took place amid a heavy storm in the Kerch Strait, which separates Russia from occupied Crimea. At least 1 crew member so far is believed to have died, and authorities are investigating criminal negligence. Unverified video appears to show one tanker split in half as oil leaks into the water. A rescue and clean-up operation is now underway, with more than 50 personnel involved, though the full extent of that oil spill is at this stage not known. Those are the latest headlines for now. Plenty more still to come throughout the rest of this hour. Now, though, it's back to Darren.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks very much, Sam. Let's get stuck into today's topics. The Home Secretary has refused to set herself a deadline to bring illegal migration to heel, despite admitting that the rate of illegal channel crossings is far too high. Yvette Cooper criticised the Tory government, saying slogans will simply not solve the small boats crisis. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch spoke to Camilla Tominey on GB News this morning. Let's have a quick listen to what she had to say.
I'm not going to run away from the subject of immigration. I never have. Labour are pretending that they're tough on immigration when actually they stopped us from doing quite a lot of things. It wasn't just the fact that we had a majority in the Commons. We did not have a majority in the Lords. So a lot of legislation, the Rwanda legislation, even when we were putting it through, it was getting blocked elsewhere. So I'm not going to have Keir Starmer, who wanted foreign criminals to stay in this country, actively stop them from being deported, pretend that he is Mr. Immigration.
Well, joining me now to discuss this is the political director of GetElected.uk, Matthew Goodwin-Freeman. Matthew, thank you very much for your company. The one issue that keeps coming into our inbox is that actually these 13,000 migrants that have been removed, that Yvette Cooper has been championing all weekend, actually comes down to people voluntarily leaving and then voluntarily leaving with 3,000 quid of our money.
Well, remember, a lot of what Labour are trying to take credit for was actually stuff that the Conservative government put in place. And actually, we've seen over 20,000 illegal crossings by migrants since the general election alone. So for anyone to start saying that Labour are actually smashing the gangs is completely ridiculous, because it's well documented that illegal migrants are saying, we wanted Labour to win because we knew they'd make it easier for us to get here. So it's ridiculous. We've got no deterrent now. The borders are practically open, and we're seeing hotel use going up and millions of pounds of taxpayers' money being spent on it when we've got pensioners who are freezing this winter. It's absolutely ludicrous.
Well, listen, I said earlier, plague on both their houses, because I can spot a certain man behind your head there of the name Boris Johnson. And that man, you could argue, was responsible for leading a government which actually swung open Britain's borders like Boxing Day sales.
I completely disagree. The Conservatives spent 3 years getting the Rwanda plan over any obstacle thrown in its way. It was a working deterrent because we saw crossings go down by a third in a year as a result of it. And as we've just heard what Kemi was saying earlier to Camilla Tominey, you know, Labour blocked this every step of the way, and then obviously on day one scrapped it, and instantly we saw migrant crossings rise. So I completely disagree with you. The Conservatives were trying to be tough on immigration. I've always been happy to hold my hand up and say we didn't get it through, but crossings were down, illegal crossings were down by a third as a result. So even though we didn't get a flight off, the Rwanda plan was having an impact. And now it's all going backwards.
Well, just finally then, the Reform Party are hoovering up votes, not just from the Conservatives, but from the Labour Party, if the polls are to be believed. Now, that comes down to a complete collapse in trust and faith in both of the main political parties. Now, how would you see a route back to winning in 2020, well, by 2029, given that sheer collapse in support for them?
Well, you're completely right. Politics is all about trust in the person that's on the ballot paper, and we are very much facing a deficit of trust in just general mainstream politics. And that's what we're seeing Reform come through. The thing that I hold on to is the fact that I was the campaign manager for Bob Blackman's campaign in Harrow East. We ran on his track record of delivering in our local area actually tangible things that you can point towards. And in the end, we turned his seat from a marginal one to the safest seat in the country for the Conservatives, doubling the majority. So that would be the message I have for politics generally. Focus on your local area, actually deliver, stop saying slogans and all these random things, actually be a good local MP and the voters will reward you for it. And that's what I'm saying to all of my colleagues, and I would say to anyone across the party lines.
All right, well, I'll tell you what, a lot of viewers and listeners will be saying, hang on a minute, all the Tories delivered to my area was a migrant hotel.
Well, we were closing them, and now they're all opening up again.
Well,
so, you know, there again.
Yeah, Labour promised to stop them and they've opened more. Anyway, Matthew Goodwin-Freeman there, thank you very much for that take. Let's see what my panel make of this, the political commentator Matthew Stadlin and the broadcaster Charlie Downs. I mean, Charlie, you heard what was said there, a pro-Conservative message. You don't hear those very often. And the fact of the matter is the complete betrayal that people feel within the public it's seismic.
Well, there was a time where I called myself a Conservative, not really in the party sense, small C Conservative. But I don't even call myself a small C Conservative anymore, because I think the political ideology, the theory of conservatism has failed. I don't think it's the right framing for the situation we find ourselves in this country, where radical and immediate action is necessary in order to right the course of this country. Conservatism is far too cautious, it's far too slow-moving, it's far too fearful of change, that it's just not equipped to deal, especially with the problem of migration, because, you know, the demographic situation that we're looking at, you know, we have a very limited amount of time. We have maybe a decade, I would say, looking at projections of the demographics of Britain to actually rectify this issue. And I think the idea of conservatism, a kind of hands-off approach where we try to maintain the status quo and we support the way that things have been, is entirely the wrong way to think about these
Sounds like
things.
you're saying we need reform.
Well, to be honest with you...
As in reform, not political party reform. Not necessarily.
Well, I mean, you know, I think Reform UK, the party, as a vehicle, could be the vehicle for a new type of right-wing politics that is not conservative as such. It's more radical, it's more action-oriented, it's more vital and energised, because I think that's what certainly a lot of young people are crying out for.
We'll talk more about reform afterwards. I did promise that I would let you ask Matthew your question. So go on, what was your question?
Okay, well, this relates to the topic that we have been talking about. I just want to understand why it is that you keep going to bat for the state that governs us, given how badly managed it is and what it's done to our country. I can't wrap my head around how someone, a self-respecting person, can continuously defend the status quo and say that it's not politically captured and say that it's accountable. And
you obviously weren't paying attention to me on TV and radio and social media over the last however many years, because I was constantly holding the Conservative government to account. And where I think Labour have got things wrong since they came to power, I hold them to account as well. I think the Labour government is better positioned to do good for this country than the Conservatives, who I think are part of yesterday's conversation at the moment. I think Kemi Basenock's leadership has been hopeless so far. Not easy for her, but I think it's been hopeless. And I think Reform are posing challenging questions, but I don't think they have any answers whatsoever. Nigel Farage is one of the most effective politicians of this age, but that doesn't mean he would be effective in government, and I believe that very strongly. Doesn't mean he doesn't represent a threat to Labour. Be completely naive if Labour were not to take him seriously. Maybe I spend too much time on social media, but to me, the sassy opposition at the moment is coming from Reform, that very, very tight-knit group of 5 MPs, rather than from the Conservative Party, which, although it was decimated at the last election, still has 121 MPs.
Charlie?
I'd put it to you, Matthew, that the reason, you've said already on this programme that you don't think the civil service has a political agenda and that the government as a whole is, generally speaking, accountable. I would put it to you that the reason that you don't see the political bias that is clearly present in all organs of the managerial state of Britain is because you agree with them, is because you are a political friend to the system.
I just put it to you that you've got no evidence for these accusations you're making about the civil service, and you haven't served as part of the civil service any more than I have, and therefore, apart from headlines in the Daily Mail, I don't see what your evidence is for that. Well, I just want to come back, though, on this issue of borders. I want to say 2 quick things. One is, I think Labour are serious about borders. Yvette Cooper is no soft touch. Just look at her political record and look, as I said earlier, of what she's doing in terms of returning people, some voluntarily, some not, to their home countries since Labour came in power. And also realise that I think they're clever enough, even though they made some mistakes generally in government, they're clever enough to realise that they need to grip immigration. But I also want to make a wider point. If you are, Charlie, trying to defend the idea of some sort of static country, static population, static community, you're fighting a losing battle. The population of our country has changed from the word go. You look back through every phase of British history, and I'm a very patriotic and proud Brit myself, we have had shifting populations. In recent years, it's been very, very dramatic, and that isn't going to change anytime soon. We live in a much more fluid world than you would like, but you're not going to change that.
So, Matthew, listen, I agree that change, especially demographically, is inevitable. This was a line that was fed to us by Tony Blair when he was the Prime Minister, that mass migration, globalisation is inevitable, and so we have to either get on the train or be left behind, and this is, obviously the hymn sheet that you're singing from. But I put it to you that if the question is not whether we have change, but what type of change we have, then I say that the kind of migration, the kind of demographic change that we've experienced as a nation over the last few decades is a bad kind of change, because an enormous number, especially in the last 5 years, an enormous number of people have come from areas of the world with very little in common with Britain. Culturally, in terms of values, in terms of their principles, in terms of their history. If you look at the migration that's taken place to the British Isles over the last 2,000 years, it's all been peoples from surrounding nations that have come here and you're right, they have created the cultural and genetic conditions that we now have on the British Isles. But if you look at the kind of migration we've experienced, as I say, in the last 5 years, it's of a totally different type, and it's fundamentally, qualitatively different. Because it would be more desirable to have migration. If we're going to have migration, if we're going to have a kind of a fluid border system, it would be more desirable for people to come from countries that are more culturally similar to our own.
So making some very, very serious points there that I think are worth pushing back on.
Yeah, I will let you push back.
Including the word genetic. What do you mean by the word genetic?
On the point of Labour taking it seriously, do you accept that Labour are taking this seriously politically?
Well, again, The way that I always think about it is we have the public-facing elected element of government, which is the 650 MPs sitting in the Commons, who we see on TV all the time and who are essentially the faces of the government. But the government itself, as we've spoken about already on the show, is a huge organisation, hugely complex. And I think that whilst we might hear from the mouthpieces that they're going to sort this out and that sort of thing, I think the political will just simply doesn't exist at the various levels. The kind of incomprehensibly complex state.
What do you mean by the genetic? What do you mean by the genetic makeup of our country? Are you saying that one race is preferable to another race?
No.
So
Where did you got that from?
Well, what do you mean by genetics? You talk about the genetic makeup of our country shifting in a way that you don't like. What do you mean by that?
I didn't say that.
You used the word genetic. What did you mean
I said that the migration over the few thousand years that the British Isles have recognisably existed in their current form has created the genetic environment that we live in today.
What's that genetic environment? What do you mean by that?
I don't understand why
you use the words. I'm pushing. You're huffing and puffing. You're not answering my question. You use the word genetic. I'm asking you what you meant by the word genetic.
A group of people that have come here, from a different place.
Of different races, you mean genetically?
No.
Well,
what do you mean then?
Come on.
This
is a boring game of gotcha.
No, this is.
I don't know.
You used the word.
Just come out and say what you're trying to say.
I'm asking you what you mean by the word genetic. Are you saying that some races are superior to others? Because I thought that you people from your political standpoint, roughly, and you've been putting me in pigeonholes for a while, so I might try and do the same to you. Try to talk today in terms of culture.
Okay.
You've just used the word genetic.
Let's let Charlie come back.
Well, I really don't know what I have said here that is so controversial.
You've used the word genetic.
Yeah, OK, so genetic conditions are a thing that exist, and the genetic conditions of Britain have been informed by thousands of years of movements of people.
Sorry, are you saying that people with certain genetics or certain racial characteristics are superior to others?
We'll
You're not saying that. Well, then maybe better to leave the word genetic out.
Genetics during the break. All right, Matthew Statlin and Charlie Downs there. Now, during Advent, my friends, we count down to Christmas Day. We're hearing from church ministers across the country. Now, each day they have a special message for you to celebrate the festive season.
The GB News Advent Calendar, Day 15.
Hi, I'm Richard England, Vicar of Crofton Parish. We often think that faith and doubt can't coexist. If you have faith, surely you have no doubts, right? People of doubt can't have faith. Some of us who doubt, we often kind of feel envious of those who have so much faith. In Matthew chapter 13, we see John the Baptist, the second most important person in the gospel, having doubts. He's a preacher, he's a prophet, he's a true believer, but he's been imprisoned, and in his cell, his certainty is starting to ebb away. Was I right to believe? The truth is, faith and doubt coexist within all of us. Jesus doesn't criticize John for his doubts. He just reminds him of why he believed in the first place. Whatever your doubts, maybe this Christmas is the opportunity for you to remind yourself of what and why you believed in the first place.
Lovely, they're beautifully shot, aren't they? You can see all of our special Advent messages as Christmas approaches by visiting gbnews.com/Advent. Merry Christmas. Now, you're with me, Darren Grimes, on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on the show. Could we really be seeing a three-horse race at the top of British politics? According to a brand new poll, Nigel Farage's Reform Party sit just 3 points behind the Tories. One of them actually had them above Labour. And the gap could continue to close with financial backing from one of the richest men the world has ever known. Who could that be? All of that and more to come, and also this question. We've got a question there asking what evidence Matthew has that Labour are taking immigration seriously. We'll put that to him after the break. See you after this. You're with GB News, we're Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now we're joined now by Sophia Viraji, the co-founder of the Azealia Foundation, which was created due to the tragic passing of her 8-month-old daughter to leukemia. The foundation is doing some incredible work for children's cancer.
Yeah, some really incredible stuff. They've just launched a PhD even where they're funding young doctors to specialise in childhood cancer as, get this, I wasn't aware of this, it's one of the most underfunded areas in the NHS. So not many sectors choose to go down that route, unfortunately. The charity, the foundation, have donated over £1 million worth of equipment to hospitals as well, and we're delighted to welcome Sophia. You've turned a tragedy and grief into triumph, I guess, and something so inspiring. Just tell us about that. Do you recognise that in yourself and the work you're doing?
Yeah, I'm here to always honour my daughter and to always continue her name, her legacy, and to support all of these other children fighting against childhood cancer.
It was all over social media. I mean, you were at one point probably one of the most famous families in this country because of Azealia and Azealia's fight. When you look back now at that time, does it give you comfort that you had so many people behind you?
Absolutely. The community that we have got, the humanity that we've seen in the UK and all around the world, in fact, has really touched my heart, and that kindness, love and support has always been the backbone of carrying me through this, to give me hope, to give me belief, and it still inspires me and encourages me till today to continue to do that, to show that light, to show that courage and bravery.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Weekend with me, Darren Grimes. Now, could we really be seeing a 3-horse race at the top of British politics? According to a brand new poll, Nigel Farage's Reform Party sit just 3 points behind the Conservatives, and the gap could continue to close with donations from the world's richest man. That's Elon Musk. How much of a threat to the status quo will the party be heading into 2025? Don't forget, we've got those local elections coming up in May. Let's see what my panel make of this. The political commentator Matthew Stadlin and the broadcaster Charlie Downs. Matthew, reform seemed to be a pretty viable threat when it comes to Labour as well. That issue of immigration, it's music to Nigel Farage's ears to hear that both parties speak of it so often and so much. Are they just playing into Nigel Farage's hands?
I was not the only person ahead of the general election, privately, and I think probably publicly, but I can't remember, expressing concern about what would happen if after 2 years Keir Starmer's Labour government failed to deliver. And it's clearly very unpopular already. We're only about 5 or 6 months in. Serious figures earlier this year were warning that if Labour doesn't deliver in those 2 years, it's an arbitrary figure, but 2 years, you've got a chance to do something in that period of time, then the country could lurch to the hard right, the far right. You take your pick of the language used.
Is reform far right?
I don't particularly want to get into the semantics of it because it distracts from...
Well, you just tried to get into the semantics of poor Charlie.
No, but those weren't semantics. Those was a word that Charlie used, which I called him out on.
Well, there will be a lot of people who are quite annoyed by you dismissing reform and their voters potentially.
I haven't dismissed them.
Right.
I've just explained that before the election, I was not the only person who was concerned that if Labour didn't deliver, reform would become a threat. And I think they are a threat.
On that point, on Labour taking this seriously, you said before the break Labour are taking this seriously. What evidence do you have that Labour are taking these issues seriously?
Well, we've been talking about it right at the top of the programme.
Voluntary deportations.
No, not just voluntary. 13,500 people, since Labour came into government, have been returned to their home countries. Some of them voluntary, some of them not. We heard from one of your guests earlier that some of those who've gone home voluntarily were given £3,000 to do so. That may offend some people, but it's a lot cheaper than a hotel.
All right, Charlie?
Yeah, I agree with your last point there. I think that paying people to leave, whilst not ideal, is a solution that works. But on the general topic of reform, as I've said already on the show, I think that there is an energy, a right-wing energy, nascent right-wing energy, sweeping across the West, really. We've seen this with Trump, we've seen this with the AfD in Germany, we've seen this with the National Rally in France, which are all political forces that get called far-right.
And can you link that to migration?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%, because these are all, in many ways, reactions to demographic change brought about by mass migration, which has been a policy that's been implemented into pretty much every Western nation. But reform, I think, is the nascent expression of this phenomenon in British politics. I think that they are not perfect. I think they're having some teething problems. I'm aware that they're a young party trying to upscale in a very short amount of time. But I think that, if they want to be a serious contender and possibly take government at the next general election, which is clearly what they want to do, they keep saying this, I think that there needs to be conversations about, really creating a policy platform instead of trying to be all things to all men. Because that's what populism is at the end of the day. Populism is more of a style of politics than an actual platform. It's more of a rhetorical device. I think that in order for reform to mature, they need to move away from the kind of crowd-pleasing populism, and they need to offer a genuinely radical, energised, exciting platform that's actually going to give people
What would their policy be on migration that you would want to see in particular?
Well, Richard Tice said, didn't he, in the build-up to the election, one in, one out.
Yeah.
He would have run the country like a nightclub. And the problem with that...
Do you support that?
No, I think so. So net zero immigration was reform's policy. I'm not sure whether that's something that they're still standing by. But what they should be offering, if they were listening to the British public, which I think they are, is a moratorium on immigration.
Okay.
Gross zero, not net zero.
Yeah, well, obviously, I think that's complete nonsense, because we don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face. If you're one of those people who thinks that migration has happened at too great a pace, and I probably count myself amongst those number, because there are various issues that can arise from that, that doesn't mean that we don't need some immigration, because if we didn't have any immigration, we wouldn't have people doing the vital jobs that so many immigrants do at the moment. Now, there may be an issue where, as it were, native British workers are priced out of the market by people taking lower wages, let's say, just for example, in the construction industry. That may be part of the problem. But there is also a problem that we don't seem to have enough people either willing to do certain jobs or skilled enough to do certain jobs. And I want to just quickly say that Labour at least say they are trying to tackle that.
All right, yeah. On that point, Labour plan, as Matthew says, to build 1.5 million homes. And the argument is from the construction sector, we need more migration in order to build these 1.5 million homes. So I've got people at home pulling their hair out, seeing this cycle that never ends, where we need more migrants to actually build more homes for the migrants that we've brought here, 1.5 million. And even then, it's not enough homes to actually house everybody that wants a house. You can't supply the demand. So what on earth will it take for people to stop? Because you will always hear people like Matthew, with respect, saying, well, we need more migration to fix that issue.
2 points. The first is a point I've made before on the channel, which is in the dying days of the Soviet Union, vast amounts of the apparatus of the state was dedicated to covering up the fact that communism had failed, to upholding the lie that communism was working. And we're seeing the same situation in Britain, where huge amounts of state energy are used covering up the fact that mass migration has been a catastrophic failure for our country. You're right, we have these construction companies saying that we need more migrants to build houses for the number of migrants that are already here. Because the population of Britain is not growing because of native birth rates. The native birth rate is 1.5. So if anything, if not for mass migration, our population would be going down.
It's partly been because of people living for a longer time. But clearly, immigration has played a role in that.
Sure.
But you keep coming back to the state, and to me that is very obvious obviously a conspiracy theory. The idea that there's some sort of deep state that is desperate, as you say, to cover up on mistakes, as you say, them on immigration. I just think that's bonkers.
A brief reply, Charlie.
Well, it's been spoken about by many different politicians who've been in the places to know, like Suella Braverman, for example. She said that the civil service just don't want to do the job because they're ideologically possessed.
Right, OK. Charlie there, our broadcaster, and Matthew Stadlin, political commentator. Thank you very much to the two of them. We'll come back shortly with me, Darren Grimes, on GB News. We've got plenty more coming up. We'll be broadcasting an exclusive interview with Alex Burghardt, the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, who sat down with Gloria Di Piero after his barnstorming Prime Minister's Questions appearance. Don't go anywhere.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. Quite a mild theme to our weather over the coming few days, but also a windy one as well. You'll see on the pressure chart there is a lot of isobars here, meaning some very strong winds around, particularly around parts of the North Yorkshire area. The A1M could provide some quite tricky travelling conditions with gusts of up to 65 miles an hour here, and there's a wind warning in force. Also some gales around coastal areas of Scotland also. Quite cloudy for most of us this afternoon with spots of drizzle in the west, the most persistent rain across areas of western Scotland. But you'll see there that mild theme in place for all of us everywhere in double-digit figures, well above where we'd normally expect to be for this time in December. That theme will generally continue as we head into this evening as well. The cloud really remaining intact for the vast majority of us, quite grey skies into the evening period. Again, those odd spots of drizzle out towards the west just to contend with, but the rain really will be very persistent across parts of western Scotland. Over the next 24, 48 hours, we could see widely half a month's worth of rain falling across parts of the Scottish Highlands, perhaps locally up to 150 millimetres of rain. So some travel disruption is certainly possible, and a rain warning comes into force from this evening, running all the way through until midday on Tuesday, with that rain really very persistent and heavy at times. Further strong gusts of winds throughout tonight, with a very squally band that moves its way into parts of Caithness and Sutherland as well. Temperatures, though, again, are going to be on the mild side for many of us, holding up around 9 to 11 degrees Celsius. As we head throughout the rest of Monday, that rain band is still very much in play across areas of Scotland. But elsewhere for Northern Ireland, England and Wales will hopefully start to see the cloud breaking up a bit more and a few more sunny spells developing during that afternoon period to provide a bit of a brighter day overall. Still, though, the odd shower around to contend with. Temperatures reasonably similar to today as well, generally 11 to 12 degrees Celsius. That mild, slightly unsettled theme does continue throughout Tuesday and Wednesday, but a few sunnier spells again emerging into Thursday, our temperatures also dipping. Bye-bye.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Darren Grimes. Now, every Wednesday, we see the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition go head-to-head at Prime Minister's questions. But what happens when the Prime Minister is away? And Sir Keir Starmer's been away quite a lot. It's the Deputy Prime Minister who takes up the reins when that happens. Kemi Badenoch, leader of the Conservative Party, took the decision of not appointing a Deputy Prime Minister, well, Shadow Deputy Prime Minister, which gave the opportunity of a lifetime to one of her MPs, Alex Burghardt. He's the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, and he sat down with Gloria Di Piero, explaining what his experience was like.
47-year-old Shadow Cabinet member, Alex Burghardt, you were elected as a Conservative MP in 2017, and last month you did something which very, very few politicians ever get the chance to do. You stood in for Kemi Badenoch at Prime Minister's Question Time.
This government is doing it to the British people. High tax, high inflation, low growth, low reform. There's a word for that, Mr. Speaker. It's Starmerism. It's because the truth is ugly. The truth is that this is a punishment meted out to people who don't vote Labour. It's the same punishment meted out to parents who send their children to private schools. It's the same punishment meted out to the owners of small businesses terrified about national insurance contributions. And it's the same punishment meted out to pensioners who can't afford to pay their fuel this winter. Isn't it the truth, Mr. Speaker, that if you don't vote Labour, they don't care about you?
I want to know everything about this. How did you find out? When did you know that you were going to do this?
Well, I got, I think it was Monday night, and I got a phone call from Kemi.
Monday night?
Yeah, I think it was Monday night. Kemi phoned me up and said, Prime Minister's away this week. I said, oh, right. And she said, so he's not going to be at PMQs. I said, oh, right. Well, so you're not going to do it either. Well, who should we ask to do it? She said, you're going to do it.
Oh, my gosh.
And I thought, oh, OK. And I didn't sort of really process it in the moment. I thought, all right, that's something I've got to do on Wednesday. And then it was sort of a couple of hours later, as I was sort of leaving the office, that it sunk in that this was happening. And once it's in your thoughts, you can't really escape it. Because being in the Commons, you're on the Commons a lot, you're on telly a lot, but actually you're in front of all of your colleagues at the same time. You've got the whole of the Labour Party against you,
spraying at you,
and you've got your whole family and all of your old friends watching at home, and it lives in your head through the night, in your dreams, all the way up to when you stand up, and then it goes very quickly.
Does it?
I just absolutely shot by.
Because it's 6 questions.
That's right.
And they go quite quickly.
Yeah, and then you sat down for the final one. I can't believe it's over.
Would you like to do it again?
Yeah, I would.
Do you think... Would you do anything differently, actually, if you did do it again? Did you learn something?
I know you definitely learn things about it, because... So the thing that you can't hear on TV... And you know because you've been in the Commons, right? But on TV, you don't hear the sound of everybody shouting. But you get this enormous, sort of football crowd roar, both from your side and from the government. And it's very loud. And if the speaker can't hear what's going on, he interrupts. So it breaks the flow. You lose your clips for social media. And you're in this balancing act of making sure that you don't shout too loud.
You did shout quite loud.
I did, because I wanted Mr. Speaker, wanted Lindsay Hoyle to hear what was going on. But there are some people who are more experienced who learn the trick of, you let the crowd sort of die down a bit, then you come in. And so you do learn things about how to work with the room.
Why do you think you were the one that got that phone call?
I don't know. I have to ask Kemi that. I don't
know what it's like, politics. It will have put some noses out of joint.
Yeah, she said beforehand. She said before it was made public that I was doing it. She said, we got a lot of talent in the shadow cabinet. Not everybody in the shadow cabinet is well known. I want other people to have a go. So just because I'm asking you now, it doesn't mean you'll do it next time. It's so we're gonna, and there are a lot of good people in shadow cabinet who I think will do really well at it. So I don't know. Maybe she wanted to give me a challenge.
Do you think it would be harder to do what you did to square up against Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister? Do you think she's a tougher act than perhaps the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer?
They've both got very, very different styles. And look, Angela's a tough politician, and she's very confident at the dispatch box, and she's pretty experienced. So I know, and both of them present very different challenges.
Did you chat to her afterwards?
Yes, I did. I did. Because, you got all of this sort of adrenaline. And I went up to her afterwards and I said, Angela, I do take my hat off to you, because I know how nerve-wracking it is now to ask 6 questions. Goodness knows what it's like to answer questions for half an hour.
Just wanted to ask you a non-Prime Minister's question. Before you came to Parliament, you taught history for a while.
Yeah.
And I wondered, because you came into Parliament in 2017, you won, which, makes you fortunate after what happened to the Conservative Party at the last election. But if you were to do a lecture, teach people about the lessons of the Conservative government from 2017 to 2024, can you think of a name?
Well, I'll answer a slightly different question.
I bet you will.
Because I've been back, I go and talk in schools, and I go and talk in universities, and I think there is this sort of extraordinary period, which you've lived and worked through as well, Gloria, which, say, like 2008 to now, we've had about a century's worth of history. The biggest financial crisis since 1929, biggest constitutional crisis since 1916, the biggest pandemic since 1919, the biggest war in Europe since 1945, biggest energy crisis since the 1970s, highest inflation since the 1980s.
All right, you don't have to give me the whole history.
But you get the picture, and we're living in this period of accelerated time. And there'd been this period when I was growing up where everything seemed to be getting progressively easier, and then it stopped. I think the title is a century of history inside 15 years.
So you served under, gosh, this is actually tough. I hadn't made a note of this. So 2017. So that was Theresa. Theresa May. Then we had Boris Johnson. Then we had Liz Truss. Then we had Rishi Sunak. Which one were you closest to out of interest?
So I worked with Theresa in her number 10, so I was in the policy unit there, but I never got to know her personally. And then I was Boris's parliamentary Home Secretary for a couple of years, which sort of overlapped with COVID. So some of the time I was in my constituency in Essex there, but I spent a lot of time with him, and I didn't know Liz or Rishi so well, but I know Kemi very well. Kemi is a very close friend of mine. We came in 2017 at the same time. It was clear very early on that she was going to be a star, that she was the future of politics. And it's wonderful to work with someone who you really respect and admire, but who you also sort of see as a really close friend.
Final question. So I am struck when I have conversations with people in the Labour Party about how often reform comes up and the threat that reform as a party presents, and the need to find strategies to deal with them and to take them seriously. Do you spend much time thinking about reform?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. I mean, reform came second in my seat in Brentwood and Ongar in Essex. They got about 11,000 votes, so it's a big achievement. If we don't take them seriously, then there will be consequences. So the Conservative Party has to get back the people who voted for us in 2019, but then stayed at home. A lot of people around the country who they didn't want to vote for reform, they didn't want to vote for Labour, they wanted to vote for us, but they couldn't when it came to it because they were annoyed with us. We've got to get those people back. And we also have people who went to reform because they wanted something slightly different. We've got to show them that we're the party with ideas, with a plan for government who can actually get things done. Not just a campaigning outfit. We're a party of government. We're the party that's going to clean up Labour's mess. So you have to take reform seriously. You've got to take Labour seriously. You've got to take abstention seriously. And we in the Conservative Party, we're going to need a message for young people. We're going to need the next generation of voters to come to us.
Alex Burkhart, it's been interesting to talk to you about politics, but really, really fascinating for you to lift the bonnet, if you like, on that weekly joust, that weekly bear pit that we know as Prime Minister's Question Time. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on.
Has to be said, a lot of love for Alex Burkhart in the inbox there for that PMQ's performance. You can find all of the Gloria Meets interviews on gbnews.com or on our YouTube channel. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch. We'll get to what you've been saying in a moment. You're with GB News, Web Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
My next guest knew George Carman rather intimately. Indeed, he immediately asked her for her hand in marriage when they first met. Karen Phillips knew Carman from 1986 and was a close friend until his death in 2001. Karen has used court transcripts and personal documents to construct her new book, Get Carmen. There it is. And here you are. Karen, thank you very much indeed. So you knew him very well, and actually he began to write a little bit of an autobiography just in the weeks before his death. And from those pages, I was struck by the amount of uncertainty that there was about the man. This man who was so confident in court, who charmed juries so famously, but in some ways felt that he was an actor, in some ways felt that he was fighting back nerves and uncertainties. Is that true?
I think he was quite worried about every case. It was much more that he was concerned for the client. He always wanted to do his best. He worked so hard to win a case, not really for his personal satisfaction, but because he didn't want to let people down.
His success rate was extraordinary, and, you know, I'll choose my words carefully here, but shall we say that many people were surprised at the time that Jeremy Thorpe was found not guilty. It was astonishing in the case of Jonathan Aitken, for example, that the principal charge against him, which was that he'd been corrupt in arms dealings, I don't think that was ever actually reached during the court. It seems even more surprising today that people who were employed by Mohammed Fayed were believed in the case of Neil Hamilton. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, his results are extraordinary.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Weekend with me, Darren Grimes. Thank you very much for your company. Let's finish with some of your views. Charlie Ann has written in and she says, hi, Darren. When we have a problem, which is a very kind comment, but when we have a problem with not having enough construction, plumbers, electricians, whatever else, to build for Britain, well, it actually takes between 6 to 5 years to train these. So we need to bring in external tradesmen until we can train UK citizens to meet the need. What say you?
It's a nuanced point, isn't it? Because that is probably true. But I would say that there has to be some recognition of the fact that the catastrophe of mass migration is inevitably going to mean, when actions are taken to rectify and right the course of the country, there's going to have to be some kind of sacrifice.
Too many kids going to university?
Yeah. I mean, there's this narrative that we hear that British people aren't prepared to do these jobs, that we have to bring in foreign people to do these jobs because British people won't lower themselves to doing these jobs. I think that is a total lie. I think that's basically propaganda because British people will absolutely do these jobs, especially if they're available and well paid.
And one question for you, Matthew. If Starmer wasn't blowing all of our money on creating his net zero economy, we would have loads of money to spend on the things that would benefit the British people. But Starmer's dream is more important. What say you?
Well, we've got to get to net zero somehow, but we've got to be very careful in the way that we get there.
Do we?
I think we do, because we've got to play our part. We can't just throw our hands up in the air and say we're only 1% of global emissions, so it doesn't matter, because we need to be able to show leadership, because what we do know is that the climate is changing, that weather can become more extreme as a consequence of that, and if we don't do something now, not just us, of course, the rest of the world, but we need to get round the table with the rest of the world. If we don't do something, it's going to cost us all far more in the future.
Yeah, but do you think actually if Britain went under the sea right now, tomorrow, that there would suddenly be no weather-related climate change? There would be no climate change if Britain ceased to exist?
Oh, I see. I thought you were suggesting that climate change had already become that extreme. No, but you're ignoring what I've said, which is we cannot show international leadership if we just say we're going to sit on our bottoms and do nothing. And by the way, mass migration has not been a catastrophe. There have been some issues with it, but it's emphatically not been a catastrophe.
OK, very, very brief response from you on that?
You know, I'm a 23-year-old getting married next year who wants to buy a house, and I'm looking at the situation that my country's in, and I tell you that it has been a catastrophe. Maybe not for you, but for me.
Well, I hope that when you get treated on the NHS, you remember who's treating you.
OK, Matthew Stadlin there and Charlie Downs, thank you very much to the two of you for being with me. And you've been with me, Darren Grimes, thank you very much for doing so. We've been GB News, thank you for your company. Don't go anywhere, your Nana's up next. And here's your weather with Jonathan Vautry.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, very good afternoon to you. This is your latest GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. Rain and wind in the story for some of us over the next few days. Quite blustery for many of us. On the pressure chart, you can see quite a lot of isobars on there, really packing together to produce some strong gusts around at times. The rain, though, really courtesy of this cold front that's slipping into northern areas of Scotland. It will turn quite persistent and heavy at times over western areas, particularly the Highlands, over the next 24-48 hours. A bit drier further towards the south, but still quite cloudy throughout this evening, and overnight the odd spot of drizzle still to contend with around some hillier sites. Underneath that cloud, though, it is going to be a mild night for most of us. Temperatures holding up around 9 to 11 degrees Celsius as we start off Monday morning. In that rain band in the north, though, really is going to be very persistent. Locally, we could see up to 150 millimetres of rain across parts of western Scotland. That certainly is possible to provide some disruption in places, and a rain warning is enforced, so do take care here over the next couple of days or so. Hopefully, though, for parts of Northern Ireland and then eventually into England and Wales as well, we'll start to see the cloud breaking up a touch more throughout the rest of Monday, and that will provide more in the way of those brighter, sunnier spells to develop compared to what we are seeing over the course of Sunday, which is quite cloudy conditions. Still locally gusty in places, particularly around some coastal districts. Temperatures, though, with those winds coming in from a southwesterly direction, they are still going to be on the mild side. So temperatures for many of us still in double-digit figures, topping up at around 12 or 11 degrees Celsius, notably above where we'd normally expect to be for this time of year in December. And to sun Monday evening will feature a very similar picture. Again, a few clear spells across more southern districts, but that rain will still remain very much in place across parts of northern Scotland, totting up that rainfall totals even further. Another area of low pressure moves in across parts of Tuesday and Wednesday, holding on to the mild theme, but the temperatures will start to drop off quite noticeably from Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
My name is Cliff.
And my name is Julie, and we won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.